everyone, and welcome to the public hearing, Monday, May 16th, 2016 at 4 p.m. in Council Chambers. I am going to read a statement of the chair at a public hearing, and a couple of other things. And by the way, I do have two letters here, and if any of you would like to speak at the point in the presentation when that is when that's decided, you are going to have to sign in. Now, I do have letters from some people, and you don't have to speak if you don't want to, but if anybody does want to speak, you need to sign in, please.
Okay.
Right over there.
Oh.
Okay. All right. So the statement of the chair. This public hearing is convened pursuant to Section 464 of the Local Government Act, RSBC 2015, to allow the public to make presentation to Council respecting matters contained in OCP Amendment Bylaw 1230.17 2016 and Zoning Amendment Bylaw number 1085.98 2016. Every person present who believes that their interest in property is affected by the proposed bylaws shall be given a reasonable opportunity to be heard respecting matters contained in the proposed bylaws. None of you will be discouraged or prevented from making your views known. However, it is important that you restrict your remarks to matters contained in the proposed bylaw. When speaking, please proceed to the microphone and commence your remarks by clearly stating your name and address. If they wish, members of council may ask you questions following your presentation. However, the function of council at this public hearing is to listen to you rather than to debate the merits of the proposed bylaw. In accordance with the Council Procedure Bylaw, presentations by members of the public shall be limited to a maximum of 5 minutes each. If a person has additional information that he is unable to provide within that time frame, he shall be given further opportunity to address council after all other interested members of the public have been heard a first time. Please refrain from applause or other expressions of emotion during this public hearing so that we may ensure as impartial a hearing as possible. After this public hearing is adjourned, council members will not speak to the public on this matter until after the matter has been dealt with at a public meeting. After this public hearing has concluded, council may, without further notice, give whatever effect council believes proper to the presentations made at this hearing. So, confirmation of advertising and posting requirements. Notice of this public hearing was given in accordance with the Local Government Act and the Community Charter by distributing the notice as follows. Publishing in 2 consecutive editions of the Osoyoos Times on May 4th and May 11th, 2016. Placing the notice on the bulletin boards in the Town Hall and Planning and Development Services Department on May 4th, 2016, and posting on the town's website May 5th, 2016, and distributed via e-news in May of 2016. So those were in the paper, and next is the summary of staff report, OCP Amendment number 1230.17 2016, Zoning Amendment Bylaw number 1085.98 2016. The purpose of this meeting is to seek public input on OCP and zoning bylaw amendments, which received first and second readings on April the 25th, 2016, to number 1, amend Schedule A OCP map to include the subject property within the urban growth boundary and change its land use designation from agriculture, AG, to intensive residential development, IRD, to amend the Town of Osoyoos zoning bylaw 1085, 1998, Schedule A, by changing the designated zoning of the subject property from AG, agricultural, to IRD, intensive residential development. These amendments were intended to enable a 28-unit small lot subdivision. Final bylaw approvals are subject to release of the subject property from the ALR. The town is in the process of applying to the Agricultural Land Commission to have the subject property removed from the ALR. So,
all right, Madam Mayor, I'd
yes.
like to recluse myself.
Thank you, Councillor Youngberg. So what we're going to do now is ask Director Cunningham to present the staff report on the zoning amendment bylaw.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm sorry to subject Council to this long report yet again, but this is the last time I'll read it in full, but obviously I have to do so, this being a public hearing. The town-owned Richter property is located in the southeast Meadowlark plan area of Osoyoos, adjacent to Highway 97, as shown in the following Figure 4 from the plan. It is the remainder 3.23-acre property left over from acquiring the site for our new fire hall, which is currently under construction. The following conceptual development plan shows how the property will be subdivided and built out with 24 small single-family homes and 2 duplex buildings for a total of 28 housing units, of which 4 will be subsidized as affordable units. A tot lot for families with children is also included. The subdivision is a cooperative effort between the town of Osoyoos acting as its own subdivision developer to sell service lots to Elcar Construction, which will build and sell the homes. Under Elcar's attached purchase agreement at the end of this report, they will buy 20 building lots from the town over the next 2 years and have first right of refusal on the remainder. The Richter property is currently within the Agricultural Land Reserve, ALR, and outside the town's urban growth boundary, UGB. It is designated on the OCP map and zoned for agricultural purposes. At their special meeting on April 25th, 2016, Council resolved to approve first and second readings of the 2 attached bylaw amendments. First, official community plan amendment, bylaw number 1230.17 to 16, to extend the urban growth boundary around the Richter property remainder and change its land use designation from agriculture AG to intensive residential development. And second, zoning bylaw amendment number 185.98 to 16 to change the designated zoning of the Richter property remainder from AG agriculture to IRD intensive residential development. Also following council direction, an application is being made to the Agricultural Land Commission, ALC, to exclude the Richter property remainder from the ALR by the town as owner under Section 30 of the Agricultural Land Commission Act. Members of the public are invited to comment on any of the foregoing matters. Overview. This section of the report describes how the Richter property subdivision will contribute to the following. First, effective growth management. Second, expanded housing choices. And 3, quality urban design. First, effective growth management. The Richter subdivision accords with general growth management policies in our 2007 Official Community Plan, OCP, and with more specific policies in the 2010 OCP Secondary Area Plan for the Southeast Meadowlark SEM area in which it is located. Both plans can be found on the town's website. Osoyoos faces special challenges welcoming new growth because our land base is hemmed in by the lake, mountainous areas to the west and east, the international border to the south, the Osoyoos Indian Reserve number 1, and surrounding agricultural lands. To meet these challenges and promote best practices, Osoyoos was the first local government in the South Okanagan to adopt an urban growth boundary, UGB, which will only be selectively extended out to meet priority needs while minimizing impacts on agricultural lands. While we currently have sufficient growth capacity for large lot suburban homes at one end of the market and high-density apartment buildings at the other end, we do need land for affordable, medium-density housing to accommodate younger families and others. The 40-acre Southeast Meadowlark block is ideally suited for this purpose because it still contains reasonably sized development parcels, can be economically serviced, is accessible to our downtown, and has been transitioning away from agricultural use. In 2006, the Agricultural Land Commission, recognizing that the area has been cut up by scattered development and does not offer good potentials for agriculture, requested the town to submit a plan for the review. The Southeast Meadowlark Area Plan, which we prepared, notes the area already contains 22 single-family residences and commercial and institutional uses, that only 38.8% of the land was actively still in agriculture, already down to 33.6%, and a full 26.8% of land is not used for anything. The town's area plan lays out council policies for coordinated neighborhood planning of the block to manage an orderly transition from its current rural fringe character to, over time, become an integral part of the Osoyoos urban area. The preceding Figure 4 from the plan identifies 22.3 acres of land that could eventually be built out with about 300 medium-density housing units, depending upon a mix of housing types, enough to meet this type of housing need for many years to come. Our UGB will be extended out incrementally to open up these lands as needed. The Commission endorsed our Southeast Mundaloc Area Plan by Resolution number 2638, oblique 210, and on the strength of its policies granted agreement in principle to exclude ALR properties in the area on an as-needs application basis. In responding to an application for ALR exclusion, the Commission will pay special attention to how we meet the following area plan conditions. 1. Residential development at medium densities, i.e. no ranchers on large suburban lots. 2. Inclusion of an affordable housing component to broaden choices. 3. Buffering around the edge of the block to protect farming on surrounding lands that will remain in the LR. The last condition does not apply to the Richter property because of its location in the interior of the block, but the following sections of the report show how the other two conditions will be met. So now turning to extended housing choices. As depicted below, the SEM area plan innovatively proposes a varied mix of housing types suitable for the neighborhood, which are all permitted under our specially designed intensive residential development IRD zone. Although of a medium-density format, most housing types will be ground accessible for varied users. These include small lot single-family homes, some with carriage homes, various duplex configurations including some with basement suites, and row houses and fourplexes. Apartment buildings are also permitted, but only up to 3 stories so as not to visually overpower lower housing. The Osoyoos Affordable Housing Strategy was prepared in tandem with the area plan with help from a community volunteer task force. Following its findings, Council subsequently targeted lower-income working households as a priority in investing town resources. Accordingly, in Southeast Mundaloc, all residential developers will be required under the principles of inclusionary zoning to include a share of affordable housing as a public amenity benefit in return for receiving development rights from the town. This is a first in the Okanagan. Specifically, all developers must build and sell 15% of the housing stock as, quote, near market affordable uses for eligible recipients of the 15% subsidy less than the market price, which could cover their mortgage down payment and legal expenses. Thus, based on a total build-out of Southeast Mundaloc for about 300 residences, 45 of these will be affordable homes. Eligible housing recipients will be targeted and approved through a Town Affordable Housing Authority, EFA, with a citizen volunteer board, which is in the process of being formed. A preference will be placed on attracting and retaining local working families, especially those with younger children, to promote economic and social sustainability. The Richter subdivision will kickstart Osoyoos' affordable housing efforts both by providing 28 homes at the lower price end of the market because of their comparatively smaller lots and floor space, and additionally reserving 4 of these as even more attainable near-market affordable units. In Alcar's purchase agreement, they have committed to disperse the affordable units throughout their project and ensure they are of the same size and outward appearance as the full market units to avoid any stigma effect, as well as ensure that phasing keeps up with construction of the market units. Alcar will also secure these arrangements on the property through a Section 483 housing agreement under the BC Local Government Act. Now turning to quality urban design. The area plan calls for Southeast Mundaloc to be developed, quote, as a showpiece of urban design excellence. The plan itself includes a couple of yield concepts confirming the area could be developed with a sufficiently mixed medium-density housing to achieve the Agricultural Land Commission's desired target of 30 homes per hectare overall, including some higher density apartment phases. Considerable care was taken working with the developer to come up with successful design solutions for the Richter property, including meeting its site challenges of a smaller than expected north-south parcel depth because of expanded fire hall needs, an undevelopable slope at the southwest corner, and a combination of a connector road through the property from the fire hall to Wren Place for connecting to Highway 97, while at the same time also ensuring financial viability. Focus is placed on single-family homes with narrow 9 to 9.5 meter lot frontages to make best use of the land and achieve servicing economies, but with some amenity space on each lot. The opportunity was also taken of fitting in 2 duplexes in a top lot on otherwise difficult to develop lots. The density of 21 dwellings per gross hectare, i.e. including undevelopable lands, which is notably high for a mostly family subdivision and more than typical suburban densities. High design quality will be maintained through Southeast Middle Germany and the Richter property or subdivision specifically by applying our innovative form-based zoning, another first for the Okanagan. In place of traditional one-size-fits-all development standards, our new IRD intensive residential development zone and guidelines employ descriptive text and diagrammatic guidelines to promote sensitive design solutions for accommodating different medium-density housing forms, often in close proximity to each other. All single-family homes in the Richter subdivision will have 1,200 to 1,400 square foot of floor space over 2 floors, and duplexes will be comparably sized. Elcare has committed in the purchase agreement to follow our IRD zoning design guidelines, and all Richter homes will be architect designed following these principles. Successful Richter subdivision is expected to be a catalyst for subsequent development of some privately owned lands in the area, where the town will promote even higher density forms. The Richter subdivision will be fully equipped with urban services, including streets, sidewalks, and lighting, some visitor parking stalls, sanitary and storm sewers, and separate domestic and irrigation water supply. Efficiencies will be achieved by connecting southwards from services already being installed for the fire hall. In the case of sewers, considerable cost savings will be gained by connecting directly into the fire hall gravity main, which will run through the Richter subdivision and terminate at a pump station at the south end of Wren Place, for linking across to the existing gravity mains on the other side of Highway 97. The sewer pump station is located at the lowest point in southeast Menlark to enable gravity servicing of all future development in the area at reasonable cost. Sewer connections along Wren Place will replace the current septic systems, which will help protect the large pond in the middle of the area as an attractive neighborhood amenity. Impacts: community create a large landmark development to promote community pride and growth. Budget: recover town servicing costs from lot sales, while remaining profits will recover some of our site acquisition costs for the fire hall. Organizational tasks started: applying for ALR approval, subdivision servicing design and costing, individual lot appraisals, and affordable housing program description. Upcoming tasks: subdivision approval, installed services, agree on sale of first building lots and all AH sites, issue development permit, building permits, and form affordable housing authority. Time is of the essence to meet our development obligations and developer obligations and clear the way for building starts. Sustainability: affordable housing in concert with job creation will retain and attract young working families. Recommendation: staff recommends that Council carefully consider all public info before proceeding to consider third reading at the regular meeting on June 6, 2016. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cunningham. That's a very comprehensive report dealing with all issues of this property. So the next is the correspondence received, and I do have 2 letters here. One from Ralph and Isla Petrini, and one from Haley Douglas, Bourne. And I'm just wondering if you would like me to read them out, or if you are both on the list, would you like to read them out yourselves or speak to them? Okay. Mrs. Hilson, could we see who's on the list? Thank you. So, Isla, you're first on the list. Would you like?
I would like to speak. Is that okay?
Absolutely. And you're going to speak to the letter, obviously. So, okay. So you go ahead. And this is on. The reason that we have a microphone is this is on Granicus, so it's public. So that's why we ask you to speak. You may have to move the microphone up a little bit to speak directly into it. Thank you.
Is that good there?
Yes, let's try that. Brianne will tell you if it's not.
Okay, I feel a bit nervous, but anyway.
Go ahead, it's fine.
Well, I guess it's just separate from the letter that I wrote to you, which I will refer to in a moment, and this is just on reflection. What I would just ask is that before a property is purchased again for this amount of money, which was a beautiful, fully functioning orchard at the time, I would like for there to have been community input right at the outset before this piece of property was purchased, because it was a vibrant and functioning orchard, and the only reason that it is no longer is because the trees were killed because they weren't irrigated. It wasn't that the land was not continuing to be suited for agriculture. So I just want to say that as a citizen, as of Sawyers, I would like for that whole discussion to have taken much sooner, and it not to have just been purchased for what it was, a huge amount of money. So I just need to say that. And then the letter is really pertaining to the development, which I guess is a little bit sort of sidestepping from the whole issue of whether or not I approve of it coming out of the ALR or not. I mean, obviously I would choose to keep our backwater as it is. It's beautiful, and it's very quiet, and there's lots of nature around us, and nobody would want that to be disturbed. But I also accept that there is a need for affordable housing in Sawyers, and I welcome that, but I would like to just go through the letter and make specific comments on the development itself and recommendations that I'd like to bring forward. So I'll just read it, because otherwise I'll get off topic. As long-standing residents of this quiet backwater, which is Wren Place, we'd like to express our concerns over several issues that arise from the proposed development. We are the most intimate. Ralph and I live right next door to the development, so it really is very intimate to us. And when Elaine and I discussed years ago about the fact that the property would be developed, we did talk about a buffer zone between us and the development, which is a key issue of what I want to talk about. However, that will come in point 2. Point 1 is the road access, and I was talking to my neighbours about it, and they've all signed the document. Our first choice is for the road from the new development not to extend through into Wren Place, therefore keeping the two developments quite separate, and in doing so preserve the uniqueness of the both. In this instance, the new road coming through from the fire hall side, this is our house here, so the new road coming through to go at Wren Place wouldn't actually come through, it would stop in and around this area. The sewage pipe I know has to come through, and I've been told it's going to come through along our property line here and then continue to the pump station down here. So what our proposal is that the road would stop here, that this hill that's naturally there would be part of the buffer, and that there would, as we initially discussed when the previous development was proposed, that we would have trees, etc., giving us more of a buffer between the new development and ourselves, which would help to keep down the sound and the sort of visual pollution from having people sitting or living next door to you. I don't mean to regard people as being polluting, but I think you know what I mean about just trying to preserve the integrity of both. So that was the first choice, so that in this instance, the new road coming through from the fire hall side of the development would end at the duplex nearest to Wren, where there would be adequate space for a significant and a natural buffer, enhancing the small park area here, and using the pre-existing slope mixed with a natural assortment of deciduous and evergreen trees. This would provide increased habitat for all the birds and wildlife that live in and around the pond, and provide a natural sound, light and visual barrier for both parties. The sewer could continue through as planned and connect with the sewer line coming up from the lift station. That would be our first choice, and I think 5 of the neighbours all signed that. The second choice was, if the road was to remain connecting the two properties, we request that the existing highway access to Wren, which is up here, be closed off, and that walking access only be retained. Access would therefore come through the new development. In this way, traffic noise and disturbance of our quiet and secluded area will be minimised, blocking the travel of through traffic and yet allowing all parties ease of movement. As it is now, the proposed buffer between 5 Wren Place and the first new house is just a space. You see, our house is here, and the first house is high on the hill, which will look down on us, and all the buffer that we've been promised to date is just a piece of grass. Well, obviously that doesn't give us any buffering. This house will look over us, and it will completely, sort of dominate us. So what we're asking is that instead of the sewage line running across right beside our fence, which I understand we can't plant trees on, that somehow the sewage line be moved so that there's provision for a more natural buffer between us. So it's not just a space, which wouldn't really provide us with any privacy, but the buffer contains more meat in the form of trees or a raised bream or something of that ilk. We're aware that the proposed site of the new sewer line is to run intimately along our property, and this may prevent the planting of trees. So I'm not going to reiterate myself. We're just asking if the sewer line could be moved, then obviously a true buffer could be created. And the third issue is the well-being of the pond, and this is a really, really critical and personal piece for me. As long-term residents and nature lovers, we are advocates for all the rich wildlife that lives in and around the pond. And on page 7 of Report 2, CR448, it states that the sewer connections along Wren Place will replace the current septic systems, which will help to protect the large pond in the middle of the area as an attractive neighbourhood amenity. That gives me the wobblies when I see that. It sort of suggests that the pond is going to be used for people rather than the pond being used for itself. So I would ask for definition of that statement. And we ask that the pond be regarded as only a visual amenity, and there be a covenant or protection order placed on the pond so that it not be disturbed by human intervention. I've got a complete life cycle through the year of all the birds, wildlife, reptiles, amphibious beasties that live on the pond and in the pond, and I can bring that forward if needs be. So the formation of a mini nature reserve under the protection of the town or a body like the Nature Trust is desirable in order to preserve this unique ecosystem for and of itself, not for use by man, who unfortunately so often look to having their own needs met and not the needs of the many and varied natural inhabitants. So in closing, this document represents Ralph's and my view. We also have the support of the majority of the residents of Wren Place, and just ask that our views and ideas be given serious consideration, as I'm sure you would wish for if you were in our shoes. Thank you for letting me speak. And the one last thing was that Elaine and I talked about definitely there being a fence here. If there isn't a fence here, then people can just wander down to have access to the pond, so that delineation is part of that buffering request for ourselves and also to buffer against people using the pond in whichever way they choose. Thank you.
Thank you very much for presenting your concerns, and this is why we're here, to listen to all of them, and Mrs. Hilson is taking notes, and we will definitely look at this further. Haley, would you? Oh, pardon me. Would you like to?
I could respond to some.
Absolutely,
if you wish.
And then.
Yeah, thank you very, very much for the thoughtful presentation. As you mentioned, some of these concerns have been discussed between the two of us before. With respect to the access out onto the highway, you should be advised that as per the law, we've referred our zoning proposal to Ministry of Transportation, used to be called the Department of Highways. We have to do that when there's any major any development within 800 meters of a major intersection. So they will be making a decision, or hopefully be engaging in discussions with us about what to do with Wren Place and its access out onto the highway. At the time that we rezoned the fire hall, and we similarly involved the MOT, they were quite keen about just closing it completely because they want to minimize the number of exits and entrances from a major highway. And we prevailed upon them otherwise on the basis of we needed another exit for the fire hall. I'm not sure how the discussions are going to go this time around. But you should be aware that they have decision-making powers that can be paramount to ours with respect to matters like that.
Can I just ask you a question?
Yes.
Based on that today? Can I do that? Sorry, if I could just
Not a
ask
problem.
Elaine a question. I understood there were 2 exit points for the fire engines already. One is by the dance studio, and the other one would be to go the back way past Puds and out through by the the main traffic light where the Tourist Information Centre is. So in my view, there are already 2 perfectly adequate exit points. Am I correct in saying that?
Yeah, you're right. There's another way for fire engines to go up to highway number 3, up Middle Arc. But nevertheless, we used the fire engine exit at Wren Place as an argument for keeping that open, because we felt the residents were very serious about that at the time. What would happen in a successive round of discussions, I don't know. Okay, but you're absolutely right. The important point to remember is that certainly they may have been convinced by the argument about the alternative access for fire engines the last time round. They're not going to be so swayed, I suspect very strongly, by arguments about keeping Wren Place open for the 8 residences that happen to be located on Wren Place at the present moment. That's not going to be such a powerful swaying argument with them, so you should be aware of that. So I hope I've answered that point, and I've got your other points I could respond to as well.
Okay, thank you.
Alrighty. So you talk about a buffer, and we've discussed that before. And because of topographical reasons, you'll see that in fact there's quite a large separation distance from the most southerly single-family home and your property. In fact, it's over 20 meters. For comparison purposes, I would point out that our single-family zone allows us internal side yards of 1.5 meters. This is over 20, so it's quite an additional amount of land. I do fully recognize your point about the sewer and the need for sensitive alignment of that, and perhaps with sufficient space for landscaping. And I've been in discussion with our engineer on that a number of times already. In fact, I was in discussion with him again this morning, and he assures me that they would be as sensitive as they can. So if there's a choice between putting the sewer line right next to your line and moving it up the hill somewhat, then obviously they're going to choose the latter, so there's the least intrusion on the enjoyment of your property as possible. The other point was with respect to visual amenity of the pond. And you may remember that in the Southeast Medlock area plan, we did talk to that, and the proposal was that through the development process for subsequent parcels, not right now, that consideration could be made to make that a park. It would be a publicly accessible park. But by that, I don't mean that there would be open caveat for people to go in and destroy the environment in that area. We would coordinate with the Ministry of Environment and make sure that all proper protections were in place for the habitat, the natural habitat, and for the critters that abide there. So we're very serious about that in that town, and you can be assured that we would treat that need and concern very seriously indeed. And that's it.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Rhodes, did you have a question?
Thank you, Mayor McCordoff. Well, I think my question's been answered already. But I would like to hear a response from you regarding the pond comments that you made. The pond, the way it's described on none of the maps we have in here, but one we have here, shows it, I guess, at its highest water level. And one of the questions I wanted to ask is, I noticed that it does, it does kind of, there is private property that goes into the pond area as well. And I know all of the residents there, but sometimes you have to ask rhetorical questions. And what I'm wondering is the problem with the use of the pond, or is it the traffic and the people that would be accessing that if it was fully developed? Is that a concern for you, or both? Or Is one more important than the other?
Two
Or?
are probably interlinked for me. I think it's just the fact that if something is sold as a public amenity and it's a public park, then there's a perception that it's for the use of the public. It's a bit like the national park argument. Obviously, the frogs and the fish and the birds and the turtles and the sandhill cranes, they all come down, and all the birds that are migrating through, they all have this pattern throughout the year of coming and going, and we have the resident population also. So in order to allow that flow to continue, you don't need to just preserve the pond, you need to preserve the surrounding areas so that the birds can graze in the orchards, etc., and they can nest and they can move around in safety. So if you have somebody who is not quite as aware of all of that and see the pond, as has, a couple of years ago we had people careening on the ice of the pond in ATVs and running all over the edge of the pond just because they wanted to do it. So I wish that I could trust that if it was a public park that it would be respected for the wildlife. I know it won't be. So I just want to really, really affirm that the pond and a buffer surrounding the pond would be preserved by somebody who understands not just the snapshot of what they see the day they visit, but that they would understand and be aware of the annual cycle of the animals and birds and invertebrates that live there. It's really a very special pond, and the orchardists, etc., have stopped spraying so close to the pond. My neighbour, who always used to spray, has stopped spraying. So we're trying very hard to preserve, and the turtles are just rebounding hugely. So I just really want that to be known.
So I'm not quite finished yet, but I think for the interest of everybody, it would be good if you were to speak into the mic, because it's very difficult to, because what you're saying is very interesting and it's pertinent to what we're doing. So,
doing too much talking and time.
No, I'm not asking you to repeat yourself. But
No,
Okay.
but if you do speak again, because what you have to say is relevant, so we do need it in
Do
like,
you have that? Oh, you do?
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Okay.
So I just wanted to elaborate a little bit more. All ponds in Osoyoos, all kettles in Osoyoos are important. We've had some fairly good success with interacting human population and walking and that kind of thing with some of the other areas in town. I know it's not your total comfort area, but would you be comfortable if it was developed with all of those basic things in mind? One of the things that we could do is we can almost eliminate the opportunity for off-road vehicles to go in there ever again and all that kind of thing through proper development, and so you can have the two interacting together. Not to say that we're going to go one way or the other with it, but we're certainly heading in the direction of opening it up for the public and that kind of thing, but just bearing in mind that people can change their mind at a moment's notice and that kind of thing. And that's why we have public hearings, so that we can hear these kind of responses that we probably would not be aware of otherwise. So I'd like to hear about the interaction part of it. And I know I'm repeating myself. I know it's not your total level of comfort or happiness, but perhaps there is a way to mitigate that a little bit and open it up for the general public as well.
I would say if there has to be, because to deny it is not helpful either. So if there has to be a human element, I would suggest that the way that for instance, board walking, etc., similar to the Haynes Point March with viewpoints, that does seem to be respected in the sense that it gives people an avenue to go with their binoculars. It's not. You can't take your dog down there, you're not allowed to take your bicycles down there, there's no access for ATVs down there. But, in England you have many, many bird reserves where you have hides that people can go and sit in quietly to observe the birds and observe the wildlife. And if we have to do that and can't just leave it as it is, then that would be my recommendation, that you would certainly gain some insight from people like Sarah, who works from the Frog Watch programme, the scientists involved in the Desert Centre, etc., to come and from the Audubon Society, or the equivalent of the RSPB in England anyway, to put together a quality viewing platform or situation that would definitely assist hugely in preserving the integrity of the pond. But I think that's the only way, that would be the only compromise for me personally, because I think people just will take advantage. I don't think people should be allowed to fish in the pond. The ospreys fish in the pond, that should be it. You know, the ospreys, the kingfishers, the herons, the night herons, all these birds need that pond to be left for them. So that's my,
No, thank you. Mr. Cunningham,
Yeah,
did you want to?
some excellent comments, and you make me want to move down there myself. But we would treat the area as a riparian zone, even though it's not covered by the provincial riparian area regulation, because there's no migratory fish involved. But we would apply the same rigor as we would if it's on the lake. And the idea I have is that we would be, for one thing, retaining the services of a qualified environmental professional to inventorize all of the habitats and critters that are down there, and come out with protocols for protecting them, and that those would be imported into the any design improvements in the area. If the best approach is to have a boardwalk, that certainly should be given full consideration. You mentioned that you don't want people going down there with RVs and or ATVs. I think that's an excellent idea. That can be simply accommodated by putting a fence around the area. You know, you can be assured that the town would consider these concerns very, very seriously indeed.
Thank you, Elaine. One thing I would just in closure say is the preservation of a wildlife corridor would need to be considered, because we do have moose coming through the orchard, we have sandhill cranes coming through, we have coyotes coming down and chasing deer onto the pond in the winter so that they can eat them, which is ghastly, but that is also a natural piece of life. So it's not just a static fence around a pond, it's that whole dynamic and flow of allowing the larger wildlife to move through.
And the interchanges between them.
And what?
Interchanges between them.
That's right,
Yeah.
yes. I do have
Absolutely.
pictures of the moose too, if you need proof.
Okay.
Thank you very much. A lot of information there, for sure. Haley, would you like to?
Hello, I'm Haley Bourne, and I live at 6 Wren Place. Thank you for providing me with the opportunity to voice my concerns and opinions in regards to the pending Meadowlark development within the close vicinity of my residence. In addition to the following letter, I'd like to add some amendments and ask some questions, if that's possible.
Yes.
I would also like to thank and congratulate the Planning and Development Services, as well as the town of Osoyoos, for creating a beautiful neighborhood plan and that will hopefully attract young families to our community. I am also the mother of 3 school-aged children and an educated healthcare professional. I have strong ties to our community, with family also living here, and have been since 1933. As much as I know that the proposed Meadowlark development will add value to the town of Osoyoos, as well as my own property, I do have some concerns in regards to the planned roadway and traffic changes. It is of my opinion that Wren Place should not be connected by a public road to the Meadowlark development. And I do agree with Isla's option number 1 wholeheartedly. This will create tremendous traffic through this quiet neighborhood. I am very concerned for the safety of my children, with an additional 28 homes worth of vehicles passing our house daily. And that is not even including tradespeople and such while construction is occurring, and that could be over several years. When I had talked to Mr. Cunningham, and he's been gracious enough to take his time to talk to me out of his own personal time, he said that the road would come and swoop down, and I'm like, well, what about a stop sign? It's just going to swoop down right in front of my front yard. It just doesn't make any sense to me. I understand that the fire department requires additional access to the highway, And I believe that that can be achieved by creating a laneway from Meadowlark to Wren. This could be used, this could be for emergency vehicles only and pedestrian traffic. I have seen this in other cities that I have lived in, and I believe that that we have the ability to be progressive and make both parties happy. I have heard that the alternative to this merge in streets would be to close our access off to the highway. I do not see any value to closing Wren Place off to the highway or making it a right turn only and forcing myself and my neighbors to go around the entire Meadowlark neighborhood and new fire hall. Any of these options not only inconvenience myself and my neighbors, but also affect the value of our homes and the homes in Meadowlark, and potentially put my children at risk. I highly doubt that potential home buyers in this for this new development will turn away because they are not connected to the public by a public road to our enclave of Wren. In fact, the value of our properties impacts the value of this development as well. Not to mention, the traffic from our street would be flowing through this development, making it busier and less attractive to buyers with small children. And there are several of us with boats and trailers and trucks that would be forced to go through the Meadowlark development. If traffic on the highway is a concern, then we should be looking to other progressive communities that use traffic lights to control the flow of traffic. In that regards, I would also like to add that other areas within that stretch of Highway 97 have no restrictions against them. So you have the Baptist Church, you have the Kingdom Hall, you have the Hummingbird, which comes from the rink, as well as 62nd Avenue from the golf course, and 74th Avenue, and there wouldn't be any restrictions imposed on that road. Also, there is a residence right on Highway 97 within that vicinity that has at least 8 cars at the one residence. So our few houses have to be inconvenienced, but nobody else does on that stretch to meet those concerns. The goal of creating a family-friendly development is to attract more young professionals to our community. But with the recent school closure and lack of amenities, I think that retaining the families who already contribute to this community is of equal importance. If the roadway is changed from what it is, I would likely move due to huge inconvenience to my very busy life and concern for the safety around my property. I work in Penticton as a critical care nurse and would just move to a more suitable house there. Hopefully an idea for an emergency vehicle laneway would be considered, or option number 1 from Isla, ideally. And that would be implemented in order to have virtually no negative impact to the current residents of Wren Place. I would like to remain a lifelong resident of Vesuvius, raise my children here, and contribute to this beautiful community, which I love. Thank you again for recognizing the value of local opinions and ideas. And couple questions that I have. So the Ministry of Transportation is making these recommendations to close off Wren, and is that based on the connection of the Meadowlark development to Wren, or just Wren by itself not connected?
I think that they've been rather keen on closing Wren for a long time, but clearly there has to be some interconnectivity for them to be able to agree to that. Traffic would have to exit there from another way by the road that's shown on the plan there. We don't know what the outcome of the discussions are going to be with highways. As I mentioned, we've referred the application to them because we have to by law, and we may have some first ideas or proposals from them as to what they want to do. One of the things which I've asked our Director of Corporate Services to do is what kind of public process we can organize in the case that they may want to close it. When we close a public road, meaning a road where the right-of-way is owned by the town, then there's a distinct process that we have to go through for that. I don't know what the rules are that the Department of Highways follows, but hopefully whatever happens or discussions could take place, there could be involvement by the local residents. I'd like to address some of the other points, or did you had another question right now?
I'm just not sure that question was fully answered. When this proposal was submitted to the Ministry of Transport, was it with the connection to Meadowlark?
Yes, it was. Okay.
So then if you resubmitted it with no connection whatsoever, would they still be keen on closing off Wren Place to the highway?
I think they would be asking us questions why we didn't provide interior linkage to the block as was part of the original plan, and part of that concept was provided to highways in the first place in the previous discussion. They're totally aware of that. They're not going to forget it. And so obviously they'll want to have that discussion with us in the context that there would be an internal road that would go through. Now, some of the other points you raised, there's 28 vehicles. That would be a concern. There would be more than 28 vehicles because the average traffic generation from a property can be either 2 or 3 trips a day, so it would be more than 28 if everybody went south. I would suggest you that would be unlikely, that a lot of people who would live in the new subdivision would turn onto 74th, and ultimately I think it's fair to say that we're going to have traffic lights there. It was part of the proposal that was discussed for the new fire hall, and we decided with the agreement of the fire department for the time being that we would not proceed with that because of the huge additional expense to the facility itself. But I could see that it's not unlikely that in time there would be traffic signalization there. So why would somebody go south to Wren and try to cross the traffic? They would go up to the intersection, obviously. You did mention, and we had the conversation about the traffic coming down the hill. There's a curve, and there's somewhat of a decline in elevation. And so following the discussion, I immediately sent the suggestion off to our Director of Community Services and to our engineer that full consideration should be given to installing a stop sign there. I think it would be perfectly reasonable if people are coming down a hill on a curve that you should have to stop before they turn, if in fact that's the road configuration is going to be retained. I think if there's anything else, no, that covers my points.
So there is no plan to provide access to Wren in order for the fire department to have emergency access to the highway?
Yes, there is. That was when we first went through with the rezoning for the fire hall itself, and they wanted to close Wren at that time, and they knew about the connecting road because that's part of the original concept. They wanted to close Wren, and we persuaded them not to proceed with that on the basis that we wanted to keep a secondary exit for the fire engine. Whether that argument will be sustained the second time around, I don't know. It may be a completely different game plan. There's some new people in the Ministry of Transportation, and they're excellent professionals, but there's a certain ministry culture in that department. My way or the highway, sorry about the pun, but we could end up with some very stiff negotiations. But we're not just going to, roll off and just accede to anything that they may suggest. If they're going to propose changes, that they're going to have to come up with a rationale for it, such that we can send our counter arguments into them.
So the reason why the proposal is to connect the Wren Place neighborhood and the Meadowlark development and close off Wren to the highway is to appease the Ministry of Transportation, and that you don't believe that you could win against them?
I have not said that in the least. We didn't accede to it the first time round, and I don't intend to roll over the second time round, but there will be a discussion.
That's all I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Are there any other questions that council has? No? Well, that's the end of the public hearing. We do appreciate hearing from all of you on your concerns. Many things said today that I hadn't thought of, and so I just want you to know that we do take this seriously. We will go back and have a look at these things and see if there is some way that we can work, because we're all about compromise. So we will. Councillor Campbell, yeah, go ahead.
Actually, I this was quite informing, very informing for me, actually, and the respectful concerns that came forward, I think were important. I guess my question for Elaine is based on Haley's concern with the my way or the highway attitude of that ministry. Is there an opportunity, or is it worthwhile to have public pressure and input in that process?
Yeah, that goes to the point I made earlier, that when we close one of our streets, there's a public process for doing that, and I would like to explore all the avenues to have a public process similarly with respect to this, which would involve highways. Maybe the person concerned could be invited to come to a public meeting, and local people can express their concerns. I just want to say, and I've said this point before, when we're trying to be persuasive with the Department of Highways, they're not necessarily going to be amenable to the argument that we close access in and out from Wren for the new subdivision, but we allow retaining it for 8 existing homes on Wren Place. That's not necessarily a convincing argument from their point of view. So, when we're talking to them, we need to get all our ducks in a row. We sent a referral to them. Hopefully, we're going to get some comments from them very quickly. And for the tone and content from those concerns that may be raised or suggestions, then we can develop a game plan as to how to respond to that.
Thank you. Did you have something else you wanted to add, Haley?
I just wanted to say something.
Can you go up the microphone?
When you say that the Ministry of Transportation wouldn't be amenable to the 8 residences of Wren Place, so that just means that we don't matter? Is that what you're saying?
You're putting words in my mouth again. I didn't say that. No, excuse me a moment. I didn't say they wouldn't be amenable to it. I'm saying it's not necessarily the most powerful argument to make with them. So I'm just cautioning when we have the discussion with the Department of Highways, that we get all our ducks in a row, and maybe we could have a discussion before meeting with Highways, so that we make all the appropriate arguments and we don't give them a gift horse and saying, oh gee, wow, now we can safely close it down. We have to be very careful and measured in the way that we have discussions with them. That's all I'm saying. I
think it's important to get the perspective from Director Cunningham as to his past experiences dealing with the situation, but in my mind, and as this community often does, I think when something's important and the public feels it's important, persuasive arguments are always worth trying and worthwhile. So I don't take what Director Cunningham said as we accept the fact that it's likely that they won't find that as a valid reason. I think it's just drawing from some experience, but it doesn't mean you don't give it a shot and do your best to be convincing, right?
I understand that it would be not a smart move in terms of the Ministry of Transportation to have the Meadowlark development traffic and the traffic of Wren coming out on the highway. That is unsafe. That's too many. But if you only have the 8, as you say, like it's just only 8, and really it's not even, it's actually 7, but then it really shouldn't matter. Like I said, within that same stretch of highway, there's quite a few outlets of significantly more traffic than Wren Place. So, I mean, why wouldn't we make Hummingbird a right turn only and no left turn? It's right across the street from us. Yeah. So you don't want any of our traffic, the 7 or 8 homes, coming out, but it's okay to have all of that traffic coming from the rink and Hummingbird and Nighthawk below it turning left onto the highway. The same argument could be made.
Yep, absolutely.
That's
We'll-
why these hearings are important and informative.
Yes, that's why we take notes and look at all of that, for sure.
And I'm not mad or upset at you at all, Mr. Cunningham. It's just the situation.
Yeah, no, we
Absolutely,
get it.
we get it.
There's passion there, and we get it, and there hasn't been...
So people get mad at me, and, and sometimes I have it coming. So.
He's got a hard shell, but I don't think there's been anything brought up today that's not based on passion and caring and valid concerns.
Yeah.
So.
I just feel really overwhelmed as a mother
Yeah.
living in
I
this
agree with you.
community right now. And I've had
Yeah.
many sleepless nights over what has been occurring, and then now they're gonna, not they, but now there's gonna be a big change in where I actually live, my home, my children's safety, and so it's just really overwhelming.
And I think
Points are very well taken.
you're doing the right
We
thing by getting
understand.
involved.
Absolutely. Councillor Rose, did you have something? Yeah.
Just another comment, Haley. Sometimes when you make statements about the obvious, it helps simplify it, but I know Director Cunningham brought up the word road closure. Being a veteran of many of these dealings with the Highways Department, we technically would not do a road closure. We would never close your road.
No.
There is the possibility that they may close the entrance to it, and they are the owners of the property, and it's very important that we all understand that particular part of it. The town of Vesuvius does not own the right-of-way to the highway or have anything to do with the highway. They have, and Director Cunningham has been very gracious about our relationship with them, but I have no graciousness when it comes to them at all. They are extremely hard to deal with. They are very stubborn, and they have a mandate that is way above what our mandate is in our community. And, sometimes they come up with the most brilliant of solutions to things, and sometimes they're just ridiculous. But when you talk about things about, lighting and, having stop signs and all that kind of thing, they come at a tremendous cost. Because even though they're located on a highway, unbelievably, we get to pay for them as well. Not we, you and I, and every other taxpayer gets to pay for it. And not the provincial tax fund, but our local municipal fund. So we have, to the best of my knowledge, never done a road closure. I don't think there's no motivation to interfere with anything that goes on in your street.
No.
However, be reassured, like everybody else said, that we will step up to the plate and do what we have to do, what our residents would like us to do. And if that includes, arguing and fighting with them about closing the entrance off, and they could do it in a heartbeat. They could do it tomorrow if they wanted, as long as there was some other access into the property. Whether that's an appropriate or the right thing. Well, no, so to use your terminology and rationale that you used earlier, let's forget about the Metal Art plan. They could still do that. Without that, they are entitled to do that.
Okay, just if I could just say, as a negotiating position, we should go in and try to get everything we can for everybody, and not accede to what their particular wants would be. So we have to be together on that, and I'd like to see a public process on it, and instead of things being dealt with just at a bureaucratic level, that they be advised that we'd like them to come to a meeting and talk to the local residents about it.
Agreed.
Okay, I'm going to call the question again. Is there anyone else who would like to speak to this issue? Yes, please do. Come up.
I just have one question here.
Could you state your name, please, and your...
Dennis Moreira. What's the address?
You're like me.
Okay.
74th Avenue. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Go back to what Isla was talking about. I just want her to remember that that's private property. There's no, I don't know exactly what you guys are talking about. But, you know, going to the lake, the lake belongs to my property, half of the lake.
Yes.
There's no public access there. I just wanted to state this point.
So obviously, people can get in there and they use it as public access, but there isn't official
They
public
think
access. Is that
They think
it?
it's public access. There's no public access there. A fence can go up anytime.
That's, the
I just want to
gen-
state that so there's
Sure.
no confusion.
Okay.
the gentleman is perfectly correct, and when we first started talking about the park proposal and so forth and the various issues that concern that and restrictive access and the possibility of placing covenants on the properties and so forth, we got what was equivalent to a one-page legal opinion from the City of Kelowna Planning Department, how they do things. It's pretty complex, but you can be assured that we would be very, very careful on those grounds. You're perfectly correct about
But
that.
there's
point.
no, there's no easement there.
No, that's correct.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Wasn't it called Finkstag's Pond? Is that Finkstag's Pond? Yeah, that's the name of it.
Because
Yeah.
he's got most
Yeah, the property.
most
Yeah.
property around.
Yeah. No, thank you for pointing that out.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So for the second time, is there anyone who would like to speak to this issue? For the third time, is there anyone else who would like to speak to this issue? Thank you very much. We will call this meeting adjourned, and could I have a motion, please, to adjourn it? Thank you, Councillor Camper, Councillor Rhodes. Thank you to everyone for your input. That's all in favor.